Hello everyone, a very good afternoon. My name is Vivin Satyan and I work as a technical consultant in the Active Directory team here at Manage Engine. Now first of all, thank you very much for setting some time amidst your busy schedule and joining today's webinar. And over the next 30 to 45 minutes, I will be discussing or I will be sharing some information regarding Active Directory management techniques. So as a technical consultant, I've been working with Manage Engine for over 5 years now, and with that little bit of experience, I've had the opportunity of interacting with administrators while deploying Active Directory solutions and also while speaking at various conferences and seminars. Now, with that little bit of experience in hand, I have created a presentation that I believe is going to help you better manage your Active Directory infrastructure. Now, let me set the expectation right. So I'm not talking about managing your infrastructure as such. I'm just talking about managing objects within your Active Directory infrastructure. So the way by which you create user accounts, investigate permissions of users, or finding out whether there are any inactive user accounts, or checking whether the policies are in place, all that stuff. So that's going to be the agenda for the next 45 minutes. And before proceeding any further, I hope my voice is loud and clear and you're all able to see my screen. If you have any issues in hearing me or viewing the screen, please make use of the chat option available to you and do let us know. And if you have any questions during the webinar or if you have any issues, please do raise it to us. So we have a dedicated tech team here who are waiting to hear from you to assist you with the questions that you have. Okay, let's jump right into today's agenda here. Okay, now what I've done here is when I talk about managing Active Directory, there are various aspects to when it comes to managing Active Directory. Now, I have now categorized all the responsibilities that an administrator has when it comes to managing Active Directory into 4 different aspects. And then we are going to explore some options that we have in hand for managing Active Directory using all those options, right? So now, when you talk about Active Directory, managing Active Directory, you will definitely have to talk about the options or the tools that Microsoft has given us for managing Active Directory, and also the pros and cons of that technology. And I would be suggesting a better alternative for you for managing Active Directory. And last, we'd open up the stage for question and answers, or you can always shoot out your questions using the chat box. All right, so let's get started here. 4 aspects of Active Directory management. Now, the first aspect is any administrator would want to know what is going on in his or her Active Directory infrastructure. Information about users, groups, computers, contacts, you name it. So the first responsibility would be retrieving information from Active Directory. And the second responsibility would be managing objects. Now, when I say managing objects, I'm referring to creating user accounts, creating groups, modifying groups, computers, and you have a manual way of doing it and also an automated way for managing objects, right? So we're going to be discussing about that as well. And the third aspect is it's not just the administrators that involve themselves in Active Directory anymore. So it's going to be you have your HR playing a role in Active Directory, you have your helpless technicians resetting password and unlocking accounts. So you have almost everyone, I'm not exaggerating, almost everyone having their role in Active Directory in one form or the other. So it becomes very important for you to create an effective delegation model, and also you'll have to audit the actions done by the technicians or users to whom you have delegated certain stuff, right? We'll be exploring that as well. And last but not least, a must-have for every administrator, or the favorite of every administrator, I would say, is performing an Active Directory cleanup. So all these 4 aspects are going to be discussed in the next 30 to 45 minutes. Let's get started here with the options that we have in hand for performing all those 4 tasks. So we have native tools and also third-party tools for managing Active Directory. So when I say native tools, I am referring to the tools given to us by Microsoft for managing your Active Directory infrastructure. So for instance, you have PowerShell, you have your Active Directory users on computers. If you have Office 365, either be it hybrid or completely on the cloud, you need the admin center for managing your O365 infrastructure. And then you have Skype for Business, EMC, and Event Viewer. And this is for reading information from the security logs to audit who, what, when, and where. All right. So you need all these tools to manage and audit your Active Directory infrastructure, right? Because these tools are in business. So the oldest of these tools are in business for over 17 years now. And Microsoft has given us these tools to manage Active Directory. But there are some challenges with these tools that I'd like to actually share with you. Please don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to belittle any Microsoft tool here. We're just trying to explore the pluses and minuses. So some of the challenges that I feel that administrators or help desk technicians have when it comes to the native tools is some of these are listed here. Let's start with the first challenge. Confirmation messages aren't very helpful. For example, you write a PowerShell script, and then that PowerShell script is supposed to create 5 Active Directory user accounts. Okay, you execute the script. Now, 4 user accounts get created fine, and 1 user account among the 5 failed for some reason, right? Now, the confirmation message that you get for the failure isn't going to tell you the attribute that was not in place that actually led to the failure. Or even if it's going to be some other reason, you wouldn't have the exact message for failure. This is just for creation. You have a lot of other areas where the confirmation messages that you get aren't very helpful to troubleshoot, right? So that's one challenge. And then now that we're talking about various tools given by Microsoft, consolidating information from all these tools, for instance, Office 365 Admin Center and your Skype for Business Console, EMC, and then Event Viewer, consolidating information becomes a Herculean task when you have multiple tools, right? So when these two tasks are going to be a bit difficult for administrators, IT administrators, now then talk about delegating them to non-admin users, because the learning curve involved and the time that is going to be invested in actually getting to know the technology. Forget about mastering the technology. Getting to know the technology is something that you cannot overlook. So we have these challenges in hand when it comes to using the native tools for managing your Active Directory infrastructure. I'm not exaggerating. These are some things that you might have experienced in real time. All right. Now, with these stuffs in hand, but we have a task that every administrator needs to do, that is manage Active Directory. So can this job of managing Active Directory be made a little more easier? All right. Not having to write PowerShell scripts, execute it, troubleshoot it. Is there an easier way of managing Active Directory and yet a very secured fashion of dealing with Active Directory? That's exactly what we're going to be talking about. And we at Manage Engine have created one piece of solution for you, which we have named it as AD Manager Plus, that could help you manage your Active Directory infrastructure in a very simple yet secure manner. That's the whole idea here. So we are going to go through all these 4 aspects that we just discussed so far, which is retrieving information, managing users, delegating stuff, and also cleaning up Active Directory. So we're going to have a look at these 4 aspects, and we're going to see how to achieve these 4 things with AD Manager Plus. I hope this session is going to be really informative for you and you start using the tool to the best of its capabilities after this webinar. Now, the first stuff that most of the administrators would want to do is retrieve information from Active Directory. And you might be having various reports or various queries that you'd like to perform. I'm just picking some of the important queries that any administrator would want to have, some common queries for retrieving information. Now, the first and the most basic query that any administrator would want to have is to know how many administrators do you have in your organization, right? I'm talking about domain admins, schema admins, administrators, DNS admins, you name it. we have a variety of security groups in Active Directory, and each group has different level of privileges, but if misused, those groups can cause some serious damage to your Active Directory infrastructure. So the number one question, how many administrators do you have? All right. Now, the answer to this question can be given to you by PowerShell. All right. So now, what I'm going to do is, someone has asked me how many administrators do I have in my organization. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to just find out the members of the top level security groups in my organization. So when I say top level security groups, I'm referring to domain admins, schema admins, administrators. So all top level security groups that I've created. So I'm going to find out the members in every group. And I'm going to do stuff the Microsoft way, and let's see how easy that is. Okay, now let's say I'm going to find out the members of the administrators group. So I'm just going to do a quick PowerShell here. So get AD group members, and we are talking about the administrators group in Active Directory. Okay, and I just don't want the members of the administrators group in a direct fashion, because if I open a group, I will be just finding 5 members in the administrators group or 10 members in the administrators group per se. But in reality, what if uh, the user or what if the group is nested? So we're just not talking about direct group membership here. We are talking about nested group membership. So I would like to query the recursive members as well of the administrators group. So I type get-AD group members administrators, and I want them to be recursive in fashion. So I get all the members belonging to the administrators group or members of the administrators group in some form or the other. Oops, sorry. Okay, get AD group members, administrators. Okay, it looks like the query is successful. So now I get the list of users who belong to the administrators group, either direct or in a nested manner. But just have a look at the result that you have got from this PowerShell query. Now, PowerShell is going to be a very powerful tool in querying information, no doubt. But when it comes to formatting the information that it has queried, it does not do a good job. So what we have done is we have taken the same methodology, but we have given it to you in a way that you can easily digest and then make good use of the information. I'm just going to do the same thing using AD Manager Plus here. So what I do is I'd like to find out the users in the administrators group. So I have the query right here. I'm going to do the same thing using a GUI. So I go to users in groups. I'm talking about administrators here. So I choose the right group and I hit generate. The result is the same. I have 13 members belonging to the administrators group, and you have the 13 members listed here. But this is more user friendly, but you wouldn't be using a tool just for it to be user friendly. Of course, that's a big advantage, but what more can this tool give you to better manage your Active Directory infrastructure? So say for instance, you have an account Tom Boyd who's part of the administrators group, and for some reason you feel that Tom Boyd shouldn't be part of administrators group. You select the account, you hit remove from group. If you'd like to remove the user from all groups that he's a member of, or you'd like to wipe him out of just specific security groups like domain admins, schema admins, select them here, hit OK, get the job done. So this not only gives you visibility into your AD infrastructure, but also helps you manage your objects from the result itself, right? But we are just talking about administrators here. So let's say you have a group, but what if you now know the users belonging to the administrators, but what if a basic group in Active Directory is linked to administrators? That could be a big security threat. And how are you going to find that out? Just from another query, we have detailed group members report here. So now the difference is I not only get the users belonging to the administrators group, I now get the groups that belong to the administrators group, computer objects within the group, and also contacts within the group. Now, this query is going to give you the exact visibility that you want when it comes to finding out the members in top level security groups. I want you to run this in your organization and find out the exact users linked to the administrators group, and also some basic groups linked to the administrators group. If you find such groups, please remove them from the list right away. All right. So that's one suggestion that I have. Finding out the exact members of a top level security group just by a simple query instead of doing a PowerShell stuff here. All right. Okay. That was just query number one. Now, let's talk about another scenario, and this is again going to be something related to group membership here, but this is from a user's perspective. The first one was from a group's perspective. This is from the user's perspective. I have a technician account here. Okay, I have named this account ITHDT, IT Helpless Technician, and I want this account to just create user accounts and reset password and access certain file servers. That's it. No elevated rights in Active Directory, just basic access. But I went through the security logs today morning and I noticed that this technician has somehow disabled few accounts in Active Directory. And I'm pretty sure, according to the group membership of this specific account, this account or this user does not have the rights to disable accounts. But the security logs don't lie. It tells me that this technician has done the action. So I do a double click. I go to the member of tab right here to verify the group membership. Domain users, account provisioning, file server access, VPN access. All basic groups in Active Directory with no rights to disable accounts. But somehow this technician has disabled accounts. So then starts my investigating journey. So I need to now start investigating the group membership of these groups. So I go to the OU in which I have the group. I open up the group. I go to the members. I see the technician right here. Perfect. I go to the member of. This is something very not likable by an administrator. A basic group in Active Directory is linked to one of the top level security groups. Now, if this is going to happen in your organization, if this is going to be the case, then a normal technician account, even though the technician is a part of just 4 basic groups, in a direct manner through nested group membership, is now a domain admin. You get the point? So it's very important that you query the nested group membership as well. And again, if you're going to write a PowerShell script, it's going to be a bit clumsy. So we have made it easier for you. So we've made the heavy lifting. So we go for groups for users. The first one was users and groups. Now we are performing the search the other way around. So groups for users. I select the account ITHTT and then I hit generate. Now, if you just notice, the Microsoft console told me that this user is a part of just 4 basic Active Directory groups, right? Whereas the same user, when I queried using AD Manager Plus, has returned with 8 groups linked to the user account. Now, how did this query add 4 more groups? Is because we investigated the nested group members right here. You see that the account provisioning group is in turn a member of domain admins, and that's how domain admins is listed here in the group membership of this user account. So you can very well select the groups that you think is inappropriate for this account and then remove it from the user account. So again, you not only gain visibility, you're also able to manage objects just by generating few reports. All right. Okay. And I forgot to mention that you can very well export these reports into different formats if you need to submit it to your auditors or managers for some reason or the other. Okay, just a piece of information. All right, so this was one query that I wanted to share with you, which is finding out the administrators accounts you have from a group's perspective and also from a user's perspective. Now, the second event that you'd like to retrieve, or that most of the administrators would want to retrieve from your Active Directory infrastructure, is finding out who has access to Carve Data, or finding out who has access to confidential files and folders in your organization. All right, so now I have created a folder named Carve Data. All right, and this Carve Data has information regarding payroll of my employees, and I want this payroll information to be accessible only by a specific Active Directory group, and I've named that group Finance Managers. All right, so I made sure that I created a folder, I dumped in all the information that should be there, and I made sure that the Carve Data is accessible only by the Finance Managers. And I was on a vacation, and I'm back after 2 weeks. And I'm not the only administrator in my organization. There are three more administrators, and it's going to be the same case in most of the organizations, right? So when this is going to be the case and you have such confidential files and folders, there are two things that you need to do on a regular basis. Number one is you need to find out who has access at this point in time over Carve Data. Number two, when you do step one, if you find that there are certain inappropriate users in the list, remove them immediately, right? So you'll have to do these two things on a regular basis, let's say at least once in every week. All right, when you have such confidential files and folders, I'm talking about top level confidential folders that you have given access to a specific group, right? So I do that now. I do a right click, I use the Microsoft way, I go to properties, and I want this Carve Data folder to be accessible only by the Finance Managers group, because that's how I have defined it. I go to properties, and then in order to check who has access and what level of access they have, I go to security. Uh-oh, there's an alarm. Another administrator or another user who has privileges of modifying the permissions of the folder Carve Data has added everyone, has given access to everyone over this piece of information. And I also see other entries here. This is immaterial. Anyways, everyone now has access to this piece of information. But I also have other users here, and they have various levels of access. So I need to know what level of access do these objects have over Carve Data folder. Do they have write access? Have someone copied information? Because we are talking about sensitive information here, right? So I'm just trying to verify the permissions one by one, and the list goes on. And this is just one half of the problem, not even one half, lesser than that. Why is that? Because I'm not just talking about Carve Data here. If you open up Carve Data, I have subfolders within. And if you open up this folder, you have another set of subfolders. So depending on the number of subfolders you have, the problem and the complexity just increases. And you'll have to think about inheritance, and you'll have to then query the permission on every folder. Now, this is just a lab setup with just 3 folders, but in reality, in your production environment, there could be more number of folders. So how are you going to perform these 2 steps? Let me show you an easy way of doing it. First, investigate permissions on Carve Data. I go to AD Manager Plus. The query that I'm talking about involves permissions, to be more specific, NTFS permissions. So I have a separate category here on my left side, and I'm trying to check the permissions, the current permissions on such shared folders. All right, please run this check on your environment if you have such shared folders. So permissions for folders, the folder that I'm talking about is Carve Data, and that Carve Data has 5 subfolders, and I select all subfolders here. All right, and then I hit generate. So now this query is going to return with the list of users and groups who have access over Carve Data, and what level of access do they have. Is it just going to be write or read or complete ownership? You have it right here. You have users, and you have groups listed here. And what level of access they have, you just hit advanced, you get it right here. So you have the permission that the administrators group has over the parent folder and also the folders within it, which is going to be the subfolders here, right? And what level of access, and is that access applicable for all the subfolders and files, whether inheritance is set to true or false. So now you get good visibility into uh, the current permissions on Carve Data. Now, when step one is a success, we can then think of step two, which is cleaning up inappropriate users. I just want finance managers to have access over Carve Data and no one else. So I would want to remove everyone except the finance managers from this list, right? So I'm not going to do it one by one because that's ineffective, right? So I go to ADMG Again, I'm going to manage something. So I go to the management tab. I have file server management right here. Modify NTFS permissions because that's what we're talking about. And I select the same folder. The folder that we're talking about is Carve Data. I have Carve Data right here. Select, and just to cross-check the permissions on the Carve Data folder, the current permissions, I can just do the permissions. I get the complete list of permissions here. Okay, this is just a cross-check of the information that we saw in the previous step. And I want this Carve Data to be accessible by the finance managers group, right? So I search for the group. There you go. I hit OK. And I just want the finance managers to have read access. I don't want them to modify information, so I'm just going to give them read access, right? Read attributes. That's it. Done. And should that be applicable to all the folders, all the subfolders? Yes, because I know the folder structure, so I'm just going to give it to all subfolders and files. And this is definitely going to be an allow and not a deny, so allow. And if I'd like to add another entry, yes, I can add another entry as well. But for now, I just want the finance managers to have access. Now, we have made this process a lot more easier for you. Say if you have another folder structure in place with the exact permission that you want to be applicable on this folder, you can very well copy permissions from that folder as well, right? So you can either manually set the permissions by defining one by one or simply copy. We have now defined that finance managers should have read access over Carve Data, but you still have another 15 entries whom we consider inappropriate and you'd like to wipe them out immediately. How are you going to do that? That's when the second checkbox comes into picture. And this reads, remove all existing permissions and apply only the above permissions. How simple is that? And how effective is that? You select the checkbox, and before modifying anything, you'd like to have a quick security check. You just do a preview and check. Okay, now I'm going to give finance managers read and execute access to the Carve Data folder. All right, everything looks good. Now I can very well hit modify. So the minute I hit modify, this folder structure gets cleaned up. So I can now make sure, irrespective of the number of subfolders that I have, I can now make sure that only finance managers have access to this piece of information. All right? Please, please, please use this. This is going to be really helpful for you. All right. That was the second query that I wanted to share with you. The third one is a very basic requirement for all the administrators out there. You always have to know information about users, and maybe you need to get the list of all user accounts in your Active Directory with their attributes and export it and import it to another application in order to integrate your Active Directory infrastructure with another third-party application, right? Who knows? So you need user information. We have made the process of retrieving user information a lot more easier. Again, we are talking about queries here, so I go to the reporting section. You have 200 plus queries, but the query that we are interested in at this point in time is retrieving the list of all the users in your Active Directory infrastructure. You can even target or retrieve users belonging to a specific organizational unit if that's your requirement, and also exclude child OUs in your query. If not, you can simply query your entire Active Directory domain and just hit generate. So when you hit generate, you get this. You get the list of user accounts with their name, their SID, account status, password status, account expiry time, and another 40 different Active Directory attributes that you can add and gain more visibility into the attributes of your user accounts. That includes employee ID and employee number, and also some other attributes related to passwords as well, right? So just by generating a report, you get user information, and you can very well export it to any format that you want and import it to any other application. Or if you'd like to manage a couple of these users, just select the users that you'd like to manage and then maybe move them, disable them, delete them, or perform any sort of operations that you want, right? So we are talking about managing users in bulk made very effective with just one query. Please use it again. All right. The last query that I wanted to share with you with regards to retrieving information is finding out accounts that have never logged into your Active Directory infrastructure. Now, I request you to just have a look at the screen for a minute, all right? Now, let's say you create 3 user accounts, all right, in the 1st of September, or let's say tomorrow. Now, I'm not saying that all the organizations have this practice, but at least some of the organizations fall into this category. So if you are creating 5 user accounts, all of those 5 user accounts will have something in common. I'm not talking about the when created date, but this, all right? So I have seen most of the organizations create Active Directory accounts with common passwords, and then they enable the flag that reads force user to change password at next logon. So the user logs in for the first time using the common password and then is forced to change his or her password, right? Now, the problem with this practice might not look very severe from the surface level, but if you just take a closer look at this, then you might be able to understand the seriousness of this. Now, it is very important to find out users who have never logged into your Active Directory infrastructure, especially if you have this practice of having common passwords for users, right? Why is that? Say for instance, I create 3 accounts, a HR account, an account for the vendors, and an account for the IT staff. This is just for example, right? So I create all these 3 accounts with the same passwords. But among these 3 accounts, the accounts that are highlighted in red are going to be the most vulnerable accounts, or in other words, the favorite accounts for hackers or intruders. Why is that? Because the account has not logged into Active Directory even once. You have created an account sometime back in September, hoping that the user would join your organization, but the user has not joined your organization for some reason, all right? And the account has not logged in even once, which is obvious, and the user is part of very basic group. Now, if an intruder is able to crack the password, the common password that you use in your organization, and that belongs to the HR, a very basic user, it takes less than 48 hours to crack the domain admin's password. That's just not a statement by me. This is the actual proof that Microsoft has come up with in their article. So it takes less than 48 hours for an intruder to crack the domain admin's password if the intruder gets hold of the common password. All right. So The user as part of basic group has not logged in even once. The account was created sometime back in September, which is now almost 2 months, more than 2 months, and the account is still in an enabled state in Active Directory. So the account is vulnerable. Similarly, the account was created here, that of the IT staff somewhere in August, and the account has not logged in even once. But this account is member of top security groups like domain admins, schema admins, etc. So it is very important for you to query or find out whether there are any such users who have never logged on in your Active Directory infrastructure, and at least quarantine them. Again, AD Manager Plus comes to your assistance here. We have the query ready made for you. Users never logged on. All right, so you go to the query, you can target a specific OU, but I'm going to find out whether there are any users who have never logged on for my entire domain. Oops, it looks like I have 95 accounts that have not authenticated against my domain controller even once. All right, and I have the name of the account. Now, what is more important is I need to know when was the account created. Only then I'll be able to take preventive measures or precautionary measures. Because if you just have a look at the slide here, I have 3 accounts, and the first account was created on the 1st of September, and the third account 1st of August, and this account, the vendor account, was created just today. So if I'm trying to actually move accounts with common passwords and that have not logged in even once, there's no point in moving the account that was created today morning, because this account is not yet become vulnerable. Okay, because who knows, this account might authenticate tomorrow. So it's very important to know when was the account created, and this report gives you the visibility that you want. For instance, I have created an account that is named as underscore finance, and the account was created sometime in 2015. And what is more alarming is the account is still in an enabled state in Active Directory. So I have all such accounts in an enabled state here. I can even sort based on account status. I have a couple of accounts that were created in 2015, 16, and they are still in an enabled state in Active Directory. This could turn out to be very a damaging security threat. So if you have such accounts that show up in this result, select all of them, disable the accounts right away. I'm not asking you to delete accounts because you might be afraid that it could break something. At least disable the accounts. From a security standpoint, this is the least you could do. Disable them and then move those accounts to a different organizational unit right from the report itself. So if you move all these accounts that have not logged in even once, and they were created sometime in 2014 or 15 or 16 or early 2017, and you move them to a different organizational unit, now you have the possibility to audit that specific organizational unit, right? And if you get an email saying, hey, Sammy has tried initiating a VPN access, and you have a timestamp close by, it means, or it could mean, that you are under attack, because Sammy's account was created sometime in 2015 and the account has not logged in, and now just because you're tracking the activity by moving these accounts to a different organizational unit, you get to know that Sammy is now initiating a VPN access to your network. So that could mean something to you. So finding out all such accounts and quarantine them is going to be the number one preventive action that you can take against such accounts, right? So please do that. All right, so far so good. So we are now going to be talking about the second aspect. So this is the second aspect out of four. The second one, the first one was about retrieving some information from Active Directory, and we just focused on four queries that you might be interested in or that is important. The second aspect would be managing Active Directory user accounts. All right, now When I say managing Active Directory accounts, there are two ways of doing it: manual, or you have an automated way of doing it. Okay, and managing basically means three things: creation, modification, and deletion. So this is basically the life cycle of any Active Directory object. So you create users, you modify them, which is reset password, unlocking them, adding them to group, removing them from group, and then you delete the accounts. So you can do these tasks the Microsoft way. Again, for any task that we are talking about, there is a Microsoft way and there is the AD Manager Plus way. So I'm just going to use one example here. Let's say user creation. All right. I'm going to do it the Microsoft way here, for which I'm going to quickly log into my test lab or test setup here. Okay, now I'm going to get a script for creating user accounts in Active Directory. All right, so I'm trying to get hold of a script for creating multiple user accounts. And you have a syntax given to you by Microsoft that is going to help you create a new Active Directory user. This script does not involve creation of an Office 365 account, Skype for Business account, Exchange mailbox, G Suite account, assigning the right licenses for users, or mapping the right policy for user account. I mean, this is just going to create a basic Active Directory account. You can maybe tweak the script or Google the appropriate script for you and then execute it, right? I'm not saying that this is impossible, but this is going to be a bit complex. We, on the other hand, when I say we, I'm referring to AD Manager Plus, on the other hand, gives you this. We have something called a user creation framework. We have named it as templates. So if you just take a closer look at this layout has pretty much all the Active Directory attributes and the integrated platforms that you would want to associate with a user account in Active Directory. So you have a regular Active Directory account with the group membership, Exchange mailboxes, remote mailboxes, and everything. And you can also create an Office 365 account. At the same time, you provision your Active Directory user. You create an Active Directory account. If Office 365 is enabled, you can very well create an Office 365 account for the same user and map the right licenses. How effective is that, right? So if you are talking about creating user accounts in bulk and not one by one, you can still make use of the template and a CSV file. The CSV file just needs to have the name, the first name of the user, the last name, and maybe the department, and then the department will be able to map the user to the right template. You give it to AD Manager Plus, you already have the template built in with all your configurations, and then you create accounts in Active Directory with all the attributes that you want. Now this is the manual way of doing stuff. Okay, automate the process. You have a CSV file and you have a template, right? These two stuffs are already there. You tell the application to create Active Directory accounts next Tuesday at 10:40. The application will do it for you. All right. Now, you are not interested in actually creating an Excel sheet, saving it in a network path, and then telling the application to go and look for this CSV file. We make the process even more easier for you. So this is an effective onboarding mechanism that the application gives you. So if you have HR databases, or if you have ServiceNow or Service Desk Plus, which is going to be a help desk application, and you already have users in it, user information in it, you can very well integrate AD Manager Plus with all this so that AD Manager Plus retrieves user information and then creates accounts in Active Directory, right? So you have the manual way of doing it with the template. You can automate the process by using a CSV file, or you can very well integrate AD Manager Plus with these components and then have your user accounts created. So we are talking about creating user accounts with all the attributes that you want in one go, all right? The third aspect, so you have your helpless technicians, resetting passwords, you delegate a role to them. You have your HR creating user accounts, you map another role to them. So when I say roles, you basically add them to security groups, right? So 70% of the administrators delegate actions to other users via group memberships. Or you use the delegation of control wizard by Microsoft to actually delegate permissions. When you delegate permissions, you can either be using a group-based delegation or you go with the delegation of control wizard. In either case, there's one common underlying factor, and that is when you add a user to a security group, you are elevating the user's right in Active Directory, or in other words, you are modifying the user's basic permissions. When you have an uncontrolled mechanism of elevating permissions in Active Directory through group membership, there becomes a problem. So a regular user account in Active Directory in due course of time has domain admin rights. And if you open up the group membership of that specific user in Active Directory, it's all messed up because you add users to a group so that they could perform a specific action. The problem is not always in adding a user to a group. The problem is you forget to revoke the access that you have granted in some cases. So please keep the number of administrators to a bare minimum. All right, so that's very important, and that's the core idea of the delegation model that I am going to suggest to you. Keep the permissions to a bare minimum, yet still get them to perform the functions that you want. I'll be talking about that in a short while. So something that I've highlighted here in red because I just wanted to spread this message loud and clear. You can delegate any action that you want to your HR, to help desk technicians, or to other administrators. It doesn't matter. But please make sure that you have a review mechanism or a way by which you audit the actions done by your technicians. At least the crucial actions like delete and disable, right? So delegating is one part, reviewing the actions is the second part. Now we have discussed enough about the complexity of group-based delegations with nested group membership in hand. So to simplify the process of delegation and to keep the number of administrators to a bare minimum in any organization, we give you task controllers. All right. So in AD Manager Plus, you can create a help desk role which would look exactly like this. All you need to do is just select the actions that you'd like to delegate to a specific role and map it to a technician. The difference is you add a user to a security group for delegation, that is going to alter the user's permission. Whereas you add a user to a role that you created, that is in no way going to touch the user's permission in Active Directory. That is the best part about delegation here, and that is how we achieve the goal of having fewer administrators in your organization. So you want a user to create user accounts, you simply create a role and map it to the user. The user can perform those roles only when they are logged into AD Manager Plus. The minute they hit sign out, their permissions in Active Directory are still remained untouched, are completely untouched. That's the best part here. So you as super admins delegate the right to create and modify accounts to OU admins. And then you have the help desk technicians who are going to be resetting password and unlocking accounts. And then you have a folk from the HR department initiating the user onboarding process. You can grant various roles to them, but this is in no way going to alter their Active Directory permissions. That's the best part here. But they would be able to perform all the actions that you have delegated only when they are an AD Manager Plus. And you also get to keep track of their changes. That's the best part here. So you not only delegate actions, but also you keep track of the changes. So you get to know who, what, when, and where. So we have various audit reports that could give you greater visibility into what's going on. All right. And you also have notification profiles that could notify you in real time about any crucial actions like delete or disable. Right. So delegation, auditing the actions, and also getting notified in real time about the changes that your technicians make, especially for delete and disable. All right. So, all right. I'm pretty sure that most of the administrators would agree with me if I say that, oh, this tool can automate the process of user creation. That's fantastic. But is there a way by which we can supervise the action before it takes place in Active Directory? This would be the question that most of the administrators would have when I talk about automating something in Active Directory, because you're afraid that something could go wrong. We give you that privilege. You now can also integrate AD Manager Plus with the Active Directory workflow so that if a user is going to disable or delete or create user accounts in Active Directory or perform any action for that matter, it would pass through a chain of approvals and then will take place in Active Directory. You can very well integrate the actions that your technicians perform in AD Manager Plus with a workflow, right? So you as an executor can view the request of disabling users, and if you find that the request is valid, you hit approve and the action takes place in Active Directory. The last topic, all right? Cleaning up your Active Directory infrastructure. So when I say cleaning up, to be more specific, I'm just going to focus on three things here. Users who have not logged in for more than 180 days or 120 or 365 days, depending on your organization's policy, finding out such accounts and removing them from Active Directory based on a process. All right, so we are here to define a process for Active Directory cleanup. So that's going to enhance your security, and also that would help you to pay for licenses that are actually active. So if you have Active Directory infrastructure and you have an application in-house that is licensed based on the number of users, you better be paying for the active users and not the inactive ones, right? So it's very important to find out the active and the inactive users so that you can remove the license that is consumed by the inactive users. So this is one advantage of going with automation. And the second category that of cleanup is going to be about computers that have not authenticated against your DCs for more than 6 months, because if you have such computers, and especially if they are unpatched, you know what could happen. And we are currently seeing what could be the drastic effect of such computers. Okay, to be more specific, we are talking about ransomwares here. So monitor such computers and make sure that they are no longer there in your organization. Or if you have such computers, make sure you at least move them to a different organizational unit and disable their functionalities and start auditing them. So when anything moves in that specific organizational unit, you know for sure that it's something to be looked out for. All right. The third object that you might want to clean is groups without any members in them. So I have personally seen organizations with over 2,000 groups in Active Directory, and at least 10% of those groups do not have any members in them. So administrators create groups, but for some reason they don't have any members in it. All right. So if you have such groups, And if you think that they shouldn't be there in Active Directory, find them out and then clean them out from Active Directory. And you need not do this manually. We give you the ability to create your own logic. AD Manager Plus gives you the ability to create your own logic, right? So I've just created a sample logic for cleaning up inactive users from Active Directory. Now just take a closer look at this logic here. Now I had told the application to find out users who have not logged in for more than 180 days. All right, so the application gets the list of users for me. Now as soon as the list is ready, I want the application to move all those users to a different organizational unit. That's step one. Now let's say there are 100 inactive users. Among those 100 inactive users, there could be at least 4 administrative accounts. To be on the safer side, I want all those 100 accounts to be removed from top level security groups that I define here. So just ripping them off of all top level group membership to be on the safer side, right? Because they have anyway not logged into my AD in the last 180 days. That's almost 6 months, right? So I'm just going to remove the group membership. And I'm going to disable the accounts. I'm not going to delete them right away, but disable them, all right? Just in case they step back or step into my organization again, I can re-enable the account. So move users, remove them from top security groups, disable accounts. And I'm going to tell the application to wait for 60 days or 90 days and delete the accounts from Active Directory. So this is the sample logic that I have created, and I'm going to automate this process. So this process maybe runs once in every 2 months and then finds out such accounts and then automatically does these things for me. Now, whenever I'm going to automate the process of disabling users or deleting them, you might want to implement a security check, as I mentioned in the previous slide. There you go. So you tell the application, you create a policy or your own logic, all right, and tell the application to remove the accounts from Active Directory. But before removing them, you implement a business workflow. Now, what this does is, instead of the automation disabling those inactive accounts, just because you have enabled workflow here, this gets logged as a request to you. You log into AD Manager Plus, you get an email so that you log into AD Manager Plus, and then you have a look at the accounts that are about to be disabled. You verify the list. You feel that all the accounts have not logged in. You hit OK, and the accounts are disabled in Active Directory, right? So that's how you supervise and execute automations. So this is how you actually can better manage your Active Directory infrastructure using an application like AD Manager Plus. A quick recap of the things that we saw. We saw about the things. We just started off with um, retrieving information from Active Directory. That was the first aspect, and we saw some of the reports that could be useful for you. And then we saw how you can manage objects, and we just saw one example of creating user accounts in Active Directory and the ways by which you can provision them and the platforms to which you can integrate AD Manager Plus with, and then create or make the onboarding process a lot more effective. And how do you delegate actions but do not touch the user permissions in Active Directory, so that you can keep the administrators to a bare minimum? And also, how do you automate the process of Active Directory cleanup? So these were the 4 things that we discussed in today's session. I hope you found this session informative. Please make use of this. You can drop an email to support@admanagerplus.com for more information. I see that there are a lot of questions coming up. I am pretty sure that I'll be able to get back to you with the answers for all of them by the end of today or max tomorrow. And the copy of this presentation and also the recording of the session will be shared with you. And thank you once again for spending some time and joining this session. You will have a wonderful evening. Bye bye.